Thank you for choosing lawline.com to fulfill your online CLE needs. Please note, in this program, there are 2 separate embedded verification codes that you must fill in at the evaluation form at the end in order to receive your credit. It is recommended that you write down each code when you hear them mentioned so that you have them saved for the end. If you have any questions during the lecture or afterwards, please email us at support@lawline.com. Thank you and enjoy.
I'm excited about being with you. I feel as though people come to gatherings like this for one of 3 reasons. I feel they're looking for solutions to the challenges they deal with on a day-to-day basis. Have any of you encountered any challenges recently as it relates to growing our business or growing our practices, especially over in the last 12 months? So 3 things. Solutions to those challenges. I'm going to share with you some solutions on that. Solutions that let's call them edisms, things that I have used, things that I have worked with my firms, both accounting and law firms, to help them grow their practices, and it has been extremely effective. Second is find out what some of your colleagues are doing. I'm going to kind of make it interactive so that you can share some of your wisdom with us. And last but not least, if I'm stuck in a room with no windows, I want to have some fun. Is that all right with y'all? Okay, now I have to make a confession. While I have lived in Texas for the last 29 years, I'm originally from Ohio. I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio, and I've been in Texas for the last 29 years, where I found out the word y'all is a word. And it comes out periodically, the plural, which is all y'all. So all of y'all will hear that every now and then, so I'm asking for forgiveness early on. Well, it's been about 5 years now. I'm doing some work with a client called ECG. The magic of ECG is it's a consulting firm of about 150 professionals up in Seattle. We had done an assessment, if you will, of the 85 professionals in that organization to find out who had the tendencies to be quote-unquote rainmakers. We had that assessment. Now we're back in Seattle. We're on the 40th floor of the tower in their office building. I'm in their conference center, and I have the executive team of about 8 ladies and gentlemen in that room waiting to go through the analysis that we had come up with. And while there's 8 of us in the room, we're waiting for the CEO. The CEO comes in. I had met him a couple of times before. He comes in. He acknowledges me. Makes the nod, and he walks over to the window. As he gets to the window, he beckons me to come over. I come over, and he says, "Take a look at that view." And it was beautiful. It was an incredible view. It's the Puget Sound. You can see the marina. He goes, "Focus on that marina." He says, "If you look at the marina, you can see a whole bunch of sailboats." Now let me pause for a second. See, this particular firm was founded by 4 gentlemen about 25 years prior to me getting there. These 4 gentlemen, 2 CPAs, 2 attorneys, decided to put together a practice of consulting, and now he was about to unearth for me the real reason why I was there. Now, I had already gone through a couple of weeks of analysis and analyzing their 85 people, and now I'm standing at the window, and he shares, "Can you see the mast of all of those ships? There's one tall one there. You see that one, the brown mast?" He says, "That's my sailboat. Your whole purpose for being here is to allow me and my partners to spend more time on that boat." He shared, "The main reason we're here is in those 85, I know we have some gems. I know we have some people with the talent to bring in revenue. And historically, the 4 of us have been the rainmakers in our organization. So what we would like is for, through your analysis and through your training and development, to help us develop some rainmakers so that we can feel comfortable in retirement while we can continue to reap from the organization we founded." Does that sound familiar? I want to talk to you a lot about rainmaking today. Share with you the genesis of it. You know, when you have a practice, when you have a business, a lot of people will go in that business, and one of the number one things they want is they want that one client. Do you know what I mean? They want that one client that is going to sustain their business over the years. Do you know what I'm saying? How many of you know what I'm talking about, that one client? You have to understand, I started out in public accounting I went from public accounting, then I went into oil and gas. From oil and gas, I was in computers for a while. And then I was in San Antonio, Texas, decided to put my shingle out again as a public practitioner. And what I had a practice that did write-up work from 1984 till about 90. And we did write-up work for small and medium-sized businesses where we would do their monthly financials as well as their tax work at the end of the year. Well, about 88 it started happening. I started having a lot of my colleagues from around San Antonio and throughout the state of Texas saying, Ed, how did you grow your practice so fast? Literally. And what I started to do was consult with several people to help them grow their business. So as I'm helping them grow their business, I found myself spending more time helping people grow their business than growing my business. So in 1990, I sold it. And I started Robinson Performance Group, helping what I call the ABCs, which I'll explain a little bit later. But I start helping the ABC professional service firms grow their businesses. So I started in 90 and I'm like excited, getting going, making work work. And as I'm making work work, I'm looking for that one client that will sustain me. And then it happened. In 1994, 4 years after being in the business, I found that one client. That one client that generated so much revenue that you really weren't concerned about the other clients that you dealt with. You serviced them, but you really fostered the relationship with that one client. Well, met him in 94. In 98, I get this phone call. And I'm always, when you get that phone call from that client, you're worried. Why are they calling me? So they called and they said, Ed, we have compared evaluations of what you're doing and the evaluations of some of the competitors you have who are doing similar things for the firm. And we came to the conclusion that we really need you to make an adjustment on your fee. Apparently, your fee is significantly lower than your competitors, and because your evaluations are higher, we would like you to raise your fee. Man, I have been waiting for that call again. I have not gotten that call again. And I asked them simply, what would be a good number for you? After they virtually doubled my fee, we started having a relationship void of, if you will, literally void of contracts. They would call, I would go, I would speak, they'd send a check. It was wonderful. And then, by the way, did I tell you who that client was? It was Arthur Anderson. And it was my favorite client. When I say it was my favorite client, we had gotten to the point where I had over 60 engagements a year with this client. They'd say, Ed, can you be in Philadelphia? I'd be in Philadelphia for a week, Los Angeles for a week. When Philip introduced me, he shared with you that I've spoken in over 30 countries. 20 of those countries, at least 20 of those countries were on behalf of Anderson. Can you be in Zurich? Can you be in Sydney? Wherever I would go, they'd fly me, send me a check. It was beautiful. Then, most of us remember, we've just gone through 2009, what we would consider a major dip on the radar screen. Would you agree with that? Do you remember the last major dip of that sort? How many of you remember 9/11? Of course we remember 9/11. 9/11 also was a significant dip on the radar screen, especially for a professional like me who relies on travel. I travel anywhere from 150 to 200 times a year. So that's a major challenge, especially when you have that dip. But that did not bother me as much as October of 2001. That was when there was the meeting of the minds of SEC, Enron, and Anderson. It was not good. But we saw that our number one client was having a challenge, and our number one client was having a challenge. So I wrote a new program that helped them with PR, helped them with communication. And by the end of January, we had 85 engagements. This is January 2002, 85 engagements on our calendar to help Anderson go through this challenge. And we're rolling it out. We're helping them going through that process. Let me pause for a second. Would you agree there are some challenges when you have one client that represents 80% of your business? Yes. Would you also agree that there's a lot of positive things? I mean, obviously there's the positive, the money, the relationship. As a matter of fact, when Anderson had its implosion, if you will, several people from Anderson asked, what are you going to do? Because they thought I was an employee of it. I was there so often. I mean, literally, they asked. By the way, that is also the genesis of what we're going to talk about this morning, the Rainmaking program. But one of the disadvantages, the huge disadvantage of having a client like that, or even a handful of clients that represents 80% of your business. See, by the end of January of every year from 98 through 2002, 85% of my calendar is full by the end of January. So what did I stop doing? Stop marketing. I stopped selling. I stopped rainmaking because it was constantly coming through the door. Because it was constantly coming through the door, I would take care of the clients I had, but I was not taking care of something that's critical. My rainmaking, proactive marketing to actually grow my business. So I gave a handout to everybody, and I would like to share with you some of the skills and kind of tell you a little bit more about the Rainmaker. I have a little chart there that actually encompasses the Rainmaker, where it goes through 5 steps, because there's something magic about rainmaking for professional services. First of all, let's even address what Rainmaker is. With most organizations, and I have to admit, I laugh on this one. With most organizations that I work with, I don't have to explain, but I have found myself talking to other audiences that are not familiar with the term Rainmaker. See, in professional service groups such as ours, we all know that the Rainmaker is that executive, that partner, that person who brings in the bulk of the revenue for the firm. It comes from the old Native American Indian medicine man who would actually be the rainmaker to bring water and rain for the crops. My favorite definition of rainmaking, however, is the second one. Rainmaker is the professional who takes a proactive role in trying to grow their business. A proactive methodology where they're constantly doing things to grow their organization, their business, as well as their people.
Please take a moment to write down lawline.com's first verification code. Lawline.com's first verification code is the word worry. All in lowercase, W-O-R-R-Y, worry.
So here we are, now April of 2002, and Anderson made that call. They called and said, Ed, we have to talk to you for a second. April 2002, they said, we have noticed that the last contract that you gave us was in 1998. The bad news is we're going to have to close our doors, and we're going to have to cancel everything that's on your calendar. At that time, as I shared with you, in 2002, we had over 85, 86 engagements on the calendar. Fortunately, May is always my busiest month. They said what we did is looked at your last contract, and it said anything that cancels in the next 30 days, we have to pay you in full. I had over 20 engagements with them, or 20 days with them over the next 30 days. So they wrote me a check for those 20 days, and the rest of the year, I was on my own. Would you agree I had a major blip on my radar screen? I had to re-engineer my business, and that was the genesis of the program that we're going to talk about today. The genesis of rainmaking. See, one of the uniquenesses about an accounting practice or the professional service groups that I talk about is something that you know. A lot of people in sales, all they have to do is sales, but accountants, attorneys, not only do we have to, as they say, eat what we kill, we also have to fillet it and serve it up, because we also have to do what? We have to do the work. So what's neat about this program is it not only establishes the goals, but it also talks about a marketing strategy that we're going to focus on. We're also going to go through a 4-step selling process that has proven to be effective, especially for professional services, because it's based primarily on building relationships. And then what can we do to make sure that back door is closed? And that's the uniquenesses for accountants and lawyers. If in fact we're taking some significant time out of our schedule to grow our business, you better be doing things and putting safeguards in place to make sure we don't have clients going out the back door. Does that make sense? And obviously we also have to talk about how we keep our program and keep our pipeline full. Would you agree we all live life in reality and we have dreams and aspirations of where we want to accomplish? Would you agree that there's a gap between where we are and where we want to be? GAAP, ladies and gentlemen, is an acronym. It's not general accepted accounting principles either. Get a plan. Today, what I'm going to share with you is that plan to help close the gap to where your revenue is now and where you'd like your revenue to be, as well as developing other people in your organization to be rainmakers in your operation. First step, establish a goal. What are your goals? How are you doing those goals? One of the things that I find people do is they have a tendency to try to sell to people before they know what they want. We always have to stay focused and know what your customers are actually looking for. One of my favorite quotes is this, and I use it as a benchmark to actually find, if you will, the barometer of how we see success. Ralph Waldo Trine says, individuals carry their success and their failure with them. It doesn't depend on outside conditions. Individuals carry their success and their failure with them. It doesn't depend on outside conditions. How many of you find that to resonate with you? You know, as I look around the room, we've got about 50 people. Can we have 50 different definitions for maybe success in here? Let me ask that. How would you define success? And this is the interactive part where y'all talk to me. How would you define success? Yes, sir.
Setting a goal.
Okay.
Realized.
Setting a goal, realizing it, awesome. Success. Yes, sir.
Traveling the path towards our preferences in an empowered manner.
Wow. Traveling our path towards our preferences in an empowered manner. Oh, you've given that some thought. I like that. I like that. Any other ones? Success. How would you define success? Yes, sir.
Freedom to choose.
Freedom to choose. Awesome. Yes, sir.
Constantly growing.
Constantly growing, as opposed to staying stagnant. I love that. Or Nightingale had a definition, the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. Different people see success in different ways. Would you agree some people see success as just making more money? Yeah. One of my mentors, I had a mentor, his name was Walter Haley. When I ran into Walter Haley, Walter was about 84 years old. Walter, you have to understand, Walter grew up very impoverished. One of his first jobs was selling flour, like Pillsbury flour, door to door. Then he started selling insurance door to door. Sold so much insurance, he bought the insurance company that he worked for and then turned around and sold it for $78 million. He would always say that was back when $78 million was a lot of money. But what I really loved about Walter, he would always say this. He says, money will not make you happy. But I always loved this second statement. He says, but it can help you enjoy your misery in some nice places. So it's not like it's a bad thing. Let's go back to success. How would you define your personal success? As I look at this quote, individuals carry their success and their failure with them. It doesn't depend on outside conditions. But for you as an individual, to what degree do you find that quote to be true and applicable to you? Give yourself a percentage from 0 to 100. Let me just do a quick inventory. How many of you are, anybody at 100? Okay, got quite a few hundreds. How many of you are at 70 or higher? 100%, raise your hand again. The bulk of us. I share with you why that's important. When I go to an organization, your firm, and I'm talking to not only your partners, but your managers, maybe even you'll throw in supervisors or seniors in there, your associates. When I'm working with that group, I want to find out to what degree are they willing to take responsibility for what goes on in their world. I want to find out to what degree do they feel literally victimized, or are they empowered enough already to step up to the plate and be in charge of what's happening in their world. See, everything happens for a reason, and I have a great colleague. His name's W. Mitchell. W. Mitchell and I were both speaking in New Zealand, 98, 99, I can't remember. And you have to understand, you don't know W. W. Mitchell was a guy when he was young, he was in a motorcycle accident. In the motorcycle accident, hit a gasoline truck and was burned over 85% of his body. He then, after he went through 2 or 3 years of recovery, he ran for mayor of his city. And his platform was not just another pretty face. The guy has a huge sense of humor, but he also has a strong, literally a strong, let's say, constitution on being successful and making results. After he had that accident, he became a pilot, and as a pilot, he's taken off in his small craft, and he's taken off, and as it's climbing, he realizes it was not going to make it. He crashed, became a quadriplegic. He's a professional speaker today, and his platform is, it's not what happens to you, it's what do you do about it. And he and I are speaking in New Zealand, and I realized that he doesn't just speak about it, he lives it. Fortunately, I had to speak before him as opposed to after him. And I'm speaking before him, and we're talking. I did my deal. He comes up after me, and as gracious as he is, he says, "Hey, Ed just shared with you a great message. It was wonderful." In between me speaking to that group and him speaking, they set that room up for a gala they were going to have that evening afterwards, and they put a disco ball in the middle of the room, continued to have the room set up. And as we're going through, and he's starting his speech, he's doing his thing, and he just shared with them, it's not what happens to you, it's what you do about it. And as he's sharing his speech, that disco ball fell on the crowd. Now, being a professional speaker and recognizing the liability a meeting planner has and the people who are putting on events, I was amazed at how he handled what happened. He took the 3 people who that ball hit, brought them up to the stage, and shared with them about how that can be the next step to their growth in their life. He mitigated a lawsuit that was amazing in my mind, and as if it never happened. So he practiced what he preaches. My question for you is, to what degree do we take personal responsibility? This is my definition. Personal responsibility says you are the principal source of the results that happen in your life, both individually and career. 2009 was a significant impact for me as a speaker as well. First part of the year, I mentioned to you my service lines, my niche, if you will, are what I call the ABCs: attorneys, bankers, and CPAs. During the CPA busy season, which is really a myth. We don't have a busy season. We have a busy year anymore. Am I right that? I mean, it used to be till April 15th, but because of that, during that April 15th, I would market to more of my attorneys and bankers during that time period and work with them. And then 2009, bankers weren't allowed to hire people anymore. As a matter of fact, Wells Fargo probably canceled 3 or 4 engagements just because of that whole stimulus and all the other challenges that they were having. So it made it a tough year. So what I did during that year is I had a theme. Every year I have a theme. My theme was this is one that I'll give you. It was R, I'm a recovering CPA, which means I use a lot of formulas, a lot of acronyms, and I can't get out of that system. So I'm going to share with you my formula and my goal for 2009, or my theme. And it was R equals A minus D. R stands for results. Your results equals your ability minus distractions. What I did in 2009 was minimize the distractions so I can hit my targets, and at the same time enhance my ability by brainstorming with some of my colleagues to find out what are new things that we can do to help grow our business even in a tough economy. Make sense? Cool. Formula for success. I'm kind of preoccupied with that. I share this with people on your team. You have to have a balance of skill sets to be successful in your practice. To go back to that quote, would you agree there's always outside conditions that affects us in our lives? A lot of people have difficulty with that, outside conditions. If I had a bullseye and in the center are things I had control of, what would be things we have control of? Would you agree there would be like our attitudes, our belief systems, our actions, our choices? I did have a gentleman once tell me that he had control of his kids. That's all right, we got him therapy. He's doing better now. The next circle would be things we have influence over. We may not have control, but we have influence and impact. And then outside of that are things that we have absolutely no control and no impact. How many of you know people who live out on the perimeters and never deal with things they have control and influence, or constantly dealing with and being a victim to life circumstances? What I'm merely suggesting is figure out what we can control and influence and stay in that circle and make that part of your sweet spot. So, outside conditions for me, up until last November, I had 3 outside conditions that affected everything I did. I have 3 incredible sons. I call them Monster 1, Monster 2, Monster 3. Love them to death. My oldest, my 30-year-old, is an attorney. He's an attorney in Charlotte. My middle one, Stephen, he's a director for Robert Half. And my young one, my 23-year-old, just graduated with child psychology, and as an undergrad, which means he doesn't have a job yet and is still on my payroll. But he's actually, my baby is 6'7", 240 pounds, and he's trying out for the Philippines next month. And say your prayers, because I just want him off the payroll. You know what I'm saying? Those 3 measure my level of success, but my favorite definition of success comes from a Chinese proverb. It says, true measure of success is how your grandchildren turn out. And I always love the subtitle on that, because grandchildren and grandparents have a common enemy. How many of you know what I'm talking about right there? Okay. I was blessed, and I said up until 2007 I used to say that. I mean, I'm sorry, up until November 27th I used to say that, because November 27th I got married. So now I have 5 kids. My kids are now 35, 31, 30, 27, and 23. And I was blessed with Angela, and I now have 8 grandkids. And that is big fun. There is nothing more fun than being called grandpa. I've got one of them that I don't care if he's playing football, baseball, whatever he's doing. When grandpa gets out of the car and runs, he stops. And he says, grandpa, and he goes into a full sprint and just jumps. You're not supposed to have a favorite, but it's hard. It's hard not to just love that little man. Anyway, back to the success. I share that you have to have this balance. TA plus CRS plus PA times AD. And you'll notice how the first 3 are added, and then the AD is a leverage factor. Woo! Okay, that's not going to work. So we're going to go off of that. The TA stands for your technical ability. Your technical ability. Would you agree to do whatever your job is, whatever your function is, you have to have some level of technical competence to be successful in doing that. That technical ability becomes critical. Whether I'm in sales, whether I'm the accountant, whether I'm the attorney, whatever my position is, I have to have some level of technical competency. But would you agree technical competency alone will not make you successful? Here's the sounding board. I get 6 to 7 calls a month where somebody says, we took them from senior to manager. They were doing such a good job because they were so technically solid. We made them a partner. And now as a partner, he is upsetting everybody, both internal and external customers, because he is not helping us grow their internal or external customers. How many of you know this person? How many of you are this person? No. And then they'll call me and they'll ask me to work on his CRS, his client relationship skills. His ability to deal with customers internally as well as externally. His ability to bring in customers, work with customers, and then the PA, the persuasive ability to help them move forward. So now I have 3 of them bracketed together, and then there's what I call the leverage factor. AD stands for achievement drive. What do you think achievement drive would be about? Would you agree it's a desire? Are you motivated? Are you willing? I have this philosophy. If you wake up in the morning and you say, oh, shoot, or some other superlative, I've got to go to work today, there's a good chance you're going to the wrong place. You owe it to yourself to do something that you have some level of enthusiasm about every day. A friend of mine puts it this way. Years may wrinkle your skin, but a lack of enthusiasm will wrinkle your soul. Stay connected. So that said, I use that as a motivating factor to say, what are the things necessary for you to be successful within your practice? And then I go into this slide. Somebody asked about time management. I have broken this into 5 skills you need to grow your business, one of which is your technical ability, your persuasive and communication ability. This one's the big one. You have to take 20% of your time, 20% of your week to develop clients. And then you go into 20% of your time to develop staff, as well as project management implementation. Let's get busy. Here's the next one. I have a concept I call visualize and eliminate blind bowling. How many of you are familiar with blind bowling? How many of you think I just make this stuff up as I go? Don't raise your hands. Blind bowling, you go into a bowling alley, they give you a blindfold, they give you a ball, they tell you to knock over the pins. Would you agree that can affect your score? How many are like me, it could improve your score? Here's blind bowling. Many of the people in your firm don't realize on their balanced scorecard that being a client developer is a critical element for their success. If we're not telling them on an ongoing basis, they don't know. Are you with me on that? They don't know. And if we're not instilling that into the culture of our organization early on, we are practicing blind bowling. We have to let them know that's something that they need to have. So that said, let's go to the first one. Whoops. The first one that I wanted to talk about was, trying to get that back on the right place. The first one I wanted to talk about was setting goals and knowing your numbers. Give you an example. When I first started my practice as a write-up practice, I had a sample financial statement. And I would go to 25 businesses every day to grow my business for the first 6 months. 25 a day, that's 125 a week. 125 a week was 500 a month. 500 a month gave me 15 appointments, and it would go like this. I drop it off at their business. I said, this is a sample of the financial statements I provide to my clients on a monthly basis. What I'm going to do is leave this with you. If you don't mind, let me have one of your cards, and I'll call you in the next 2 or 3 days and find out if what I'm providing is something that would work for you, and we can talk about it a little further. So I'd leave it, call back in 3 or 4 days. When I call back, we'd set up 15 appointments from that 500. From those 15 appointments, I get 3.7 pieces of new business. My point is not so much what we did, but do you know the numbers of your business? How many pieces do you know? I had a colleague that I was talking to just recently. He keeps track of his numbers. He says the average number of times it takes to call a client to actually sell it for him was 8.05. He goes, if he stops after 8, he's going to lose 50% of his business. Most of us stop even shorter than 8, do we not? I'll share with you some numbers on that. Let me get us back to where we're supposed to be. So what I'd like you to write down is what's your goal for the year. And it doesn't have to be, let me get to this for a second. My goal for this whole thing was very simple. This did 2 things for me. This process. I'm re-engineering post-Anderson. My process was to sell 2 pieces of business in any given week. In 2003, after we instituted this, it gave us 97 pieces of business with 72 different companies. My goal was very simple, 2 pieces of business every week. Your goal can be very simple. It could be to make 100,000. It could be to make $1 million. So if you're going to make $1 million or increase your business by $1 million, you have to ask yourself, what am I going to do to increase my business $83,000 every month? Which means it's $21,000 every week. Do you know the numbers of what you're trying to grow? Write down what your goal is. What is your growth goal for your firm? Don't worry, I'm not going to have you share it with everyone else. We're not all in the same company. So what would be your growth goal? So keep that in mind. My growth goal was 2 pieces of business in any given month. So let's do a quick marketing thing. Whenever you're trying to grow your practice, and your whole marketing efforts should be derived around this axis here, based on your branding and your expertise. If in fact you have good branding and you are an expert at it, you are seen as the recognized authority in your business. Are you with me? Your clients see you, the people who do work for you, they see you that way. Let's say you're brand new, you're a novice. You don't have the expertise, you don't have the branding, you may be brand new and you're the novice in the business. The other avenue is, let's say you work for a company that has great branding and you don't really know your way around the water cooler yet. You would be seen as the empty suit. Now, I've worked with some insurance companies in the past where their philosophy was to send the agents out to all the family and friends so that they can learn the ropes and get product knowledge on people who love them early on. How many of you know that model, okay? Where they're basically an empty suit moving forward. But this is the box that scares me the most and should scare you. And that's the box where I have great expertise and people just don't know about it. And I become the best kept secret. How many of you, I have clients, and I'll confess to that. I have clients that see me in one area and don't know other areas of expertise that I provide to my clients. How many of you have clients like that? They know you in one dimension and you've got multi other dimensions that you can actually come in and help them. One of the things that I talk about, and I'm not going to have time doing this, is what we call a value audit, where you actually go in and visit with a client on a one-on-one basis and talk about the things that we're currently doing, see how we're doing, and then have the opportunity to cross-sell other services, other opportunities that you have. Does that make sense? Somebody mentioned that in one of their things, so I wanted to just touch base on that. Here's my marketing formula of what literally created 97 pieces of business that year for 72 different companies. 80-20 times 16 times m to the third power. I told you I was still recovering. I got to have those formulas out there. The 80-20 comes from this. 80% of your income, we've all heard that. 80% of your income will come from 20% of your customers. 80% of your results will come from 20% of your efforts. 80% of your potential customers will come from 20% of the people you know today. So I had to retool my business. I wanted to find out what would be my magic mix. So I took that 80-20 and I came up with a magic mix. 25 is a lucky number for me. I have always used 25 as the number of people that I actually tried to contact. I have a form, and just make note of this because I have it in my briefcase if you're interested in it. It's a marketing contact form where it has existing clients, existing prospects, existing groups, and I'm more than happy to share that with you so that you can start instituting this. But here's a philosophy of mine. You guys can probably tell me where this came from. I have a new philosophy. I never market to one group only anymore. I like to have a mix. I don't want to rely on one resource. Here's my mix. I have 25 advocates, 25. So I have a database, for instance, I use ACT as a database, and it doesn't matter if you use ACT, if you use Excel, if you use Outlook, if you use Interaction. If you put the system together and work with your executive assistant or allow us to work with your executive assistant, we can get you a strategy that works. But we have 25 advocates, 25 customers in our sweet spot, and that's both current and prior clients. Keep in mind, I'm re-engineering my business, so I want to go, who are the clients that love me already? As a matter of fact, in my office, advocates, most people see as referral sources, centers of influence, etc. We call them advocates, people who love Ed. People who love Ed. And now let me share this with you. Of my 25 today, at least 10 of them are ex-Anderson people. It was because of those 10 that I'm working now with KPMG, Deloitte, Wealth and Tax Advisory Group, Huron Consultant, Los Angeles Probation. We won't talk about that. But all of them are. Does that make sense? What I'd like you to do is write down what are the 3 buckets that you're going to market to. What are your 80-20? And again, let me give you a pool here. Prior customers, existing customers. Are you going to have advocates, specific associations? I was working with, and it was 2 weeks ago now, I was working with an accounting firm that we did the Rainmaking with, and afterwards we do a 30, 60, 90-day follow-up coaching. So I'm sitting with their 22 partners, one at a time. And I'm going through there and finding out who are your advocates, and I help them put together, I ask them ahead of time to put their advocates together, put together their prospects, put together their second team of people that they need to deal with, and people that they have as their customers. And we go through that to see what kind of potential do we have and what system do we have to actually make sure that we're touching base with these clients on an ongoing basis. And I found out, and especially at this firm, of the 22 partners, no one had less than, this was an accounting firm, no one had less than 4 or 5 attorneys on their lists. Attorneys, bankers. So my new book came out. The $1 Million Rainmaker for Attorneys. They bought 100 of them so that they can give them to other people. Why? Because of the 16 that I'm about to talk to you about. Once you establish what your 80-20 is, the next thing is, how often are you going to touch base with your clients? 16 is the number of times we touch a client in any given year. And to be honest with you, we have 4 touching strategies. One is 16, second one is 12, third one is 6 times, and the last one is 4 times. I'm going to share that. If I take the 12 and the 16 kind of goes hand in hand. 12 times, I send something once a month to everybody. That book just came out last week. So that book will go out to my top 25 advocates automatically. We have at least one product come out every quarter. So when I get a new product, advocates get it automatically. Why? One of the things, if you remember, I said keep your pipeline full. One of the things that I do, I call it ducks, deers, and dinosaurs. Anderson had the perfect model for this. One of the things we did, the first engagements we had with Bank of America in California, Anderson that is, was a 25,000 piece of business. Within 4 years, that was a $2 million piece of business. It went from what I call a duck to a dinosaur. The book that I'm giving you guys today, the $1 Million Rainmaker, it actually looks like the other cover. But when that book came out, I sent it to my advocates. One of my advocates was used to be with HUD, is now with the Department of Justice. I sent her the book. She goes, "Hey, Ed, good to hear from you." She goes, "I totally forgot that when I was with HUD, you did leadership program for us. Would you mind coming in and doing 2 leadership programs for us?" So I went in and I did 2. The second one, she had her boss there. The boss said, "Hey, this was great. Would you mind doing it at all 35 of our offices throughout the United States?" A duck, a book, a $20 book turned into a 6-figure deal. You got to touch your customers on an ongoing basis. Let me give you another one. I'll take you a chapter out of my book. It's simple. How many of you have ever ridden a horse? Both of my books are parables, so they tell stories. Here's one of the stories. If you've ridden a horse, you realize that horses are prey, humans are predators. Horses are typically afraid of us. How many of you, it seems like 80% of you have ridden a horse, how many of you have had that opportunity to brush the horse down? Any of you? Okay. Now here's the magic. Horses are prey and they're afraid of us. When you brush that horse, it's touching that horse. Every time you brush the horse, it creates a level of trust and a greater bond. And the horse chooses not to crush you. Customers are very much the same thing. If we don't touch them on an ongoing basis and let them know us, they choose to crush us by choosing not to do business with us. And it's amazing how we get to the point where we think we are talking to them enough, and if you're not talking to them often enough, they forget you exist. I have a client who's been on retainer, Singer, Lewak, Greenbaum, and Goldstein. They're out of Los Angeles, right across from UCLA. And I've been on retainer with them for 52 months. And at the end of 2009, we put it on hold. Thank God they brought it back in for 2010. But they put it on hold because of the tough economic time. During that time, while I was not going back to California every month, what I was doing, when I was going to California every month, I was touching base with several other ex-Anderson clients. And there's one that I really knew that was on my radar screen every other month at least. I get an email from her last month, well actually it's March. In March, "Ed, haven't heard from you in a while. I've had a baby." I said, "Oh my God, I haven't heard from you." I mean, she went through pregnancy, and I said, "What, is the baby in college now?" Baby was 4 months old. So I was like, there was over a year that I hadn't touched base with that potential client. And she says, "I've got this program. They have 15 partners. They said, our 15 partners are having a strategy meeting, and we'd like you to come in and facilitate it and do the Rainmaker." Here's the reason I'm sharing that. Because I hadn't touched base with them in 15 months, I am lucky that they called me. I am lucky because I hadn't touched them. There's absolutely no reason I should just assume that they will remember I'm in business. So imagine one more touching strategy. Imagine that you and your significant other are looking at buying a new home. You're driving around, you go to down the street, you see this beautiful house, you say, that could be the one. You call the name on the realtor on the sign. You call them, you and your spouse love it, You buy the house, and then you're excited. You're telling your whole family. And then you remember that your sister-in-law and your brother-in-law are in the real estate business. They are not happy. And they say, why didn't you call me? Here's the answer. You forgot people forget who their relatives are in an emotional moment. And because of the emotional moment and not having been touched recently, we forgot that you were in the business. I'm not saying it's going to get you out of the doghouse, but that is the truth, is it not? If, in fact, you're not touching your customers on an ongoing basis, they forget that you love them. You need to touch them. So that's the 16. Oh, I mentioned I do 16. Once a month I send something, that's 12. I use 25 because every quarter, there's 13 weeks. So every week I say, what 2 of my advocates can I touch significantly this week? Can I spend time with them? Can I go to lunch with them? Can I do something significant? I'll give you an example. I flew into Philadelphia when I was coming here so I can actually spend some time with a firm called Fernley & Fernley. They're not an accounting, they're a consulting firm for association management companies. So I had lunch with the managing partner for that firm. Why? Because I'm in the area. Why? He's an advocate. Why? Because they represent 27 associations. So why do I touch them? Because I'm a speaker. I talk to associations to create attraction so that I'm seen as the recognized authority in growing practices. Does that make sense? You got to touch base with people. So I've shared with you 16, 12, and 6. 6 is literally where I have clients who don't want me to bother them every month, so I send them something every other month. The 4th strategy is the big one. It's called PEST. It's a touching strategy without being a pest. How many of you, and I know I have some merger and acquisition experts in here, but how many of you have lost a client because of a merger and acquisition? I had a client, one of my favorite clients was Farmers Insurance. And Farmers Insurance was getting ready to be acquired by Zurich Financial, and they did. We knew that far enough in advance that we started to build a relationship with the new owner and the parent company. Even though they're out of Zurich, their headquarters is in Schaumburg, Illinois. So we started using the PEST program. What was the PEST program? Month 1, we sent them a postcard telling them the wonderful things that we do. Month 2, we sent them an email with an electronic media kit talking about the 4 or 5 things that we do and our unique value proposition, what we do for their industry. Month 3, we send them that same media kit in a hard copy with one of my books or one of my CDs or one of my DVDs so that it substantiates what I sent before. But here's the magic of the 3rd touch. The 3rd touch has a letter in it that says, next month, I'd like to call and set up either a telephone appointment or a face-to-face appointment. And here's a truth confession. If, in fact, I know it's going to be a larger client or a potential dinosaur, I get on the plane and I go see him face-to-face. If, in fact, I think it's a smaller one, we'll have that conversation over the phone. There's a firm in Seattle now who's asking to do some rainmaking. They've got 230 people on their team. So I will go there and do, for their executive team, I will do like a session we're doing, a rainmaking strategy just for that team so that they know where all the elements of the rainmaking program. You got to touch people to open doors. That 4-step process got us into Zurich, and they're now a client. You got to touch people. And by the way, this can also be done 3 times a year, and you've got 12 touches for the year, constantly growing. Any questions on that? Why is that important? Here's the big one. If you get nothing else, get this. The whole touching concept works because if you touch a prospect 4 or 5 times trying to sell them, you will get about a 20% chance of closing them. When you raise that number up to 12 to 16 times, like I do with my advocates, I close 70 to 80% of the time. I do work with my advocate group every year. Why? Because I stay in touch with them. They know I love them. They see me as an advocate. I help them grow their business. Are we okay? Yes, sir. You're saying there can be too much of one thing. I try to have a nice mix. I send, again, as the PEST program shows, I'll send a postcard. Let me give you a strategy I'll give you 2 strategies. I'll give you a couple of trial and errors. My new book came out last month. $1 Million Rainmaker for Attorneys. We made a postcard of this. I had my team put together the top 100 associations for lawyers and the top 1,000 managing partners throughout the United States. We'll start the PEST program next month. All of them will get this. Yes, it's going to be a costly endeavor. If I get less than 10 firms, I will be amazed. It only takes one to cover all of my costs, and then to create enough attraction around what I do to be seen as the expert in this to help people. It is through that process with, it was through that process that I did with accountants that I ended up becoming a sponsor for ACL, where the ACL, who does data mining and those processes, asked me to come in and train their project management group, and I became an advocate only because I'm touching them. Yes, it's costly. I'll never forget the guy from Rolex who said that, boy, if I can get out of this advertising business, I would save a lot of money. He says, I probably have a $50 million advertising budget, and I know 25 million of it is just going on deaf ears. If I knew what that 50% was, I'd stop doing that. But I've got to really beat the bushes so that people. Here's the other thing is, I use this touching strategy for my existing customers as well as new customers. If I just rely on who I have on my database, I can't grow. I've got to be able to farm and get new pieces of business. And granted, it may be a time process. It may not be the only thing I do. But I don't just do one touch. How many of you have a newsletter? When I send out a newsletter, I don't just send out an e-zine or a newsletter. I'll take a copy. I'll take even a sticky note and put it on there and say, hey, John, I thought this article was pertinent for your business. And I'll just put a little note, sign Ed, and send it. Now he'll read it. If he doesn't read it, he at least knows I was thinking about him when I sent it, as opposed to a blanket send out. I wrote an article for a real estate journal, so I send that out. All I'm asking you is to touch people on an ongoing basis. The other strategy that's up there, did I pass it? If I went backwards, the M to the third power. M to the third power is basically from an old book. How many of you have an old book called Think and Grow Rich? You got to read that book. I did a study of they did a study of 3,000 millionaires looking for significant things. Here's the significant thing. All 3,000 of these millionaires had 3 books in their library. Think and Grow Rich, The Greatest Salesman in the World, and The Richest Man in Babylon. 3 parables that I love, and that's why I write parables when I write my books. But those books, you read them, they have great lessons. Great lessons. Chapter 10, Think and Grow Rich, talks about Mastermind mentoring. And it's literally a collaboration of people who get together, literally, and try to share with you my mastermind group. There's Nancy out of Boston, there's Bob here in New York, there's Steve in Jacksonville, Florida, John in Los Angeles, and myself in Texas. We get together for once a quarter for a day. It's 2.5 days is what we put on the calendar. We take a day and a half and work. The other day, I will confess, is fun. But the other day and a half, we will take for each of us 2.5 hours, and we will talk about what's going well with our business, what are the challenges, what do I need help with. And we brainstorm with each other to help our other colleagues with their industry. And then we do that for all 5 of us. Then we go have a ball and we implement it. And we hold each other accountable. That probably was one of the single most positive things that helped me regrow my business after the 2002 incident. Yes, sir.
What is the motivation for advocates to grow your business? How can you help them grow their business?
My advocates vary. Most of my advocates are people who have events more than one time a year. They have multiple events. One of the slides that I'm going to share with you here in a little bit, I'm going to tell the story now. One of my clients, Vancouver firm, they have me come in twice a year. One of their key clients and key advocates who help them with their business are attorneys. So what we do twice a year is they invite all of their attorneys, and I come in and I do a rainmaking on their behalf. I call that the triple win, which I have in your handout. The triple win is this. It's a win for their customer, it's a win for me, but it's a win for them because they're making they're giving their customers tools to be more successful, and their customer sees them as advocates helping them grow their business. Does that make sense? What is it that you can do to help your clients grow in any way? And you become an advocate. Literally, I have clients, and I'll give you the contrast. When I was with Anderson, I was in like all kinds of strategic meetings. I knew a lot of the things that they were trying to do, and I stayed involved with them. I'm at a social event. It was up in St. Charles. We had just finished a day of training, and afterwards they always have these social events. They'll have a band in, they'll have music, whatever. We're dancing, we're having a ball. The CFO is over here. It's just sat through one of my programs. I'm dancing, he's dancing, and the person next to us was the CFO for their Switzerland office. And he says, Dan, I think you need to have Ed come over to Zurich for a while. 2 weeks I'm in Zurich because I stayed involved. I could have done my program and left, but I stayed connected, and they saw me as an advocate. I did a program yesterday for a pharmaceutical company that I'm going to hold nameless only because of the story. I'm new in this particular pharmaceutical company. After I did my program for 3 hours, they were getting ready to go through their strategic plan, and they asked me to leave. And I did, but they asked me to stick around and have dinner with them later. And they said, we're going to unroll a strategic plan which is very confidential, and we just don't want anyone outside of the company to know what it is. So I went and did my deal, and then afterwards we had lunch, and literally the six VPs have me with them, and they're talking about all the stuff that they just kicked me out of the room for. I know that right now I'm not in the in crowd there. But if I continue to nurture that relationship, they'll see me as an advocate, and once I understand what their goals are, I can help them achieve it more. Let's talk about a client development system. Again, I love, if you will, I love acronyms. Why? People remember them. Acronyms and formulas people remember. My sales formula for growing your practice is simply, let's go make it rain. RAIN is a 4-step process for selling. Oops, I'm not going to share the answers. What do you think the benefits are for having a 4-step or a systematic process that everyone in your organization will follow? It's repeatable. What else? I'm sorry? It's consistent. You create a consistency. Everybody's doing it. But I'm going to share something that's really important to us. What's that? Measurable. That's it. It becomes measurable. If, in fact, we move the box, it gives a common language. You know where you are, where you've been. It helps you analyze the selling process. It helps build a culture around professional development and business development. One of the firms that, there's one gentleman who was talking about, it seems as though this is very transactional in nature. I'm not sure how many of your business is transactional. I know I've worked with some practices. The practice that I mentioned, Singer, Leewag, Greenbaum, and Goldstein, they have one segment of their business that's very, let's call it transactional. They do not only cost seg work, but they do litigational support for bankruptcy attorneys, which would you agree is very transactional in nature. But by building the relationship, it allows you to have somebody who becomes an advocate on an ongoing basis. There was a downside, by the way, of doing 97 pieces of business in 2003, and that was, and I shared with 72 different businesses. For me, the downside was 72 different businesses. I'd rather do 90 pieces with 20, 25, because I can manage 20, 25 better myself and through my office and make sure they love me and I'm there on an ongoing basis. Where I like businesses that I can repeat, come back and visit on an ongoing basis. And when I was with Anderson, I had a rule. and that was I wouldn't do any other major firms in the area, and they were everywhere, so I didn't do any major firms. But I've changed that now, obviously, after that thing. What I do now is that while I'll work with a major firm, I realize I can work with a lot of major firms. I just have a confidentiality agreement that I share nada unless you give me permission. One thing I wanted to share with you is, and I can say her name because she has given me permission to do this, by going through the Rainmaking program that we did and sitting down with her and doing coaching afterwards. Her specialty is the banking industry. We sat down and we took a look at her current clients, but by using the RAIN process, we said, let's look at the clients that we missed, that we almost got in the last 3 or 4 years. And we went back to them and picked up 4 new pieces of business of those people we almost had, because they were either not satisfied or ready to make another shift. And by doing that, it helped us pick what I call low-hanging fruit. So, RAIN is take time to build rapport, ask questions, implement a solution, and negotiate a start. I wish it was just that simple. Under reporting, under each of those 4, there's 4 key elements that we spend time and go through with. Quite frankly, there's an hour on each of these, which I can probably spend a day on each of these. But one of the things I share with you, you got to do homework and your research before, literally before you go and see a client. We had an ex-Anderson person go to a bank. That bank had put him in charge of something. And then he calls me to come and talk to him. So we did research with his new client. We went online, we looked at all the press releases. It showed CEO just hired new vice president, senior vice president, to expand the distribution of the bank throughout, all the way from San Francisco to Denver. They were going to open up the distributorship, and he basically was going to own that process. Now I had a better idea why he was calling me. So I was able to put together a strategy to help him with that process before I went there. Building rapport is probably the most critical thing. I'm going to stop for a second from following the outline and give you this. The reason I use a 4-step process is, honestly, selling ain't that hard. We think selling is hard. It ain't that hard. If you went to, and I say it ain't that hard, and I keep using ain't on purpose, if you went to a mall and you went to 10 stores, what would be some of the characteristics that you would use to identify 10 of the typical salesperson that you would encounter? What would be the characteristics that would come to mind? Young, inexperienced, non-responsive, not really product knowledge. How many of you have encountered a professional salesperson? Would you agree there's a significant difference? See, I was introduced into sales in an odd way, because in 1969 is when I decided to be an accountant. I became an accountant. I was in the 9th grade. Mrs. Lyda had us write a paper, my 9th grade English teacher, about a profession. My uncle was an accountant, and I found out that every business in America needed an accountant. I signed up because I had a propensity for math. I was actually on track to be a math teacher. And it's like, whoa, that's a much better deal. And I figured through job security, I would always have a job. If I saw anywhere in there that I had to sell, I probably would have shifted gears. I learned how to sell by accident. We were pregnant with my first son. And my best friend and I played basketball like 3 or 4 times a week. And he said, hey, why don't you pick up a part-time job? Goes literally after work, we can go from 6 to 9, and afterwards we can go play ball. And well, I said, sounds good. He goes, well, if you sell more than $150 an hour, you get 50% off of your clothes. Sounding better. So I went. I signed up. And this was during the Christmas thing. And by the way, I was good. During the Christmas time, man, I tell you, I was in men's sporting goods. Anybody came in men's sporting goods, I'd sell them that. Then I'd take them to men's suits. They'd buy that. Then I asked them if they had a spouse or something. We go in the ladies. They'd buy that. I averaged over 350. I thought I was hot. I was so good that they asked me to stay after the season. And then January hit. And then people would come in, and everybody would come in, and they would ask for Jack and Jill, as I call them, Jack and Jill. And I said, what's up with that? And nobody would buy from me because they would come in and deal with Jack and Jill, that professional salesperson. Because Jack and Jill was recognizing that all the spring garments were coming in, and they were holding the size. They called all their customers, and they held those size, what I call the prime stock, with their names on it in their size in the back of it. So people would come and ask for it. And all of a sudden I realized that's customer service. That's really selling. And what I really was at that point in time was an order taker. I really was not a salesperson. And then I realized what was the difference. A professional salesperson is knowledgeable of the people that they're trying to work with. They build relationships by finding out what are their needs and starting to satisfy those needs over and beyond the call of duty.
Please take a moment to write down lawline.com's second verification code. Lawline.com's second verification code is the word WORLD, all in lowercase, WORLD, world.
Let me get back on track. When I'm selling, I use this philosophy. I come in and I set up an agenda. I say that there's 4 things that I like for us to do today. And this is what I teach in the class. I tell them to set up an agenda. Most people are a little afraid. Say, set up this agenda. 4 things we'd like to do today. One is I need to find out a little bit more about you. Find out how you do your business and your business. Second, I want to share with you about me, what we do for our clients, and how we typically help them. Third, we'll find out if there's a marriage of what you're looking for and what I have. And fourth, we'll make a decision so that we can move forward. And I ask, does that agenda sound good for you? And then I'll say, tell me, how'd you get started in this business? And there's a whole bunch of questions that I have so that we can start building rapport. I think the sales is in the connection. If, in fact, I can make a connection with you, if, in fact, I can actually work and give you something that you're looking for, it makes a difference. Another story. Set up an appointment with the general manager for a Marriott down in San Antonio to talk to him about customer service some 10, 15 years ago. And as I went there, I got the appointment. When I got there, Mr. Seiler said, I have no idea why you're here. We don't need customer service for anything. I said, okay. So I asked him, how long have you been in the hospitality business? And he started talking, and I said, why don't you need customer service? And he says, we don't have customers. We have guests. And he kind of went through the next 45 minutes telling me his philosophy and what they do. And I says, that's awesome, because that's in line with something with our brand new program, which was put together as I listened. And my brand new program was enhancing the quality of the guest experience. And we did enhancing the quality of the guest experience for the next 4 years. You got to listen. So what I'd like you to put up under here is 80-20. 80% listening, 20% talking. And of the 20% that we're talking, 80% of that 20% should be asking questions and knowing the right questions to ask. So building rapport, asking questions, and what most of your colleagues and your team needs to know is if in fact I'm building relationships, I'm really selling, and I'm selling myself. And I'll share with you. I says, how many of you are salespeople? Let me ask this. How many of you are salespeople? How many of you ever went on a date? How many of you would like to go on a date? You need the technique. I said, but literally, if we're in a relationship, we're actually in the sales. And if you can build a relationship, you're in the business of making connections and helping people out. And that's what the whole Rainmaking is about. So we've talked about building rapport, asking the right questions. I use and how many of you have used DISC as a behavioral thing? I help people understand the DISC, understand their behavior, and literally that has been my gym for the last 15 months. I've been doing at least 15 years of DISC. But I have found out that after I do the Rainmaker and then I have a 26-page printout on each person that I have them go online and fill it out, and then I interview them when I come in and talk to them with their advocates and their prospects. And by using that report, it gives me enough information to help them open doors, and that's where we're getting the results. As a matter of fact, we're starting a new blog called Rainmaker Results, which literally is starting to highlight people who are getting results from what we're doing. And it really has a lot of attraction. But the DISC works very well. Secret, right here. of all the selling processes, the asking questions, you need to make sure your people are finding out these three things. I call them PFVs, for P for personal needs. What does your potential client need? Which is a given that all of us know. But the second one is, what is it that keeps them up at night? What do they fear? What's your biggest fear? And the last one is, what's the vision? What's your vision of where you're going? If you can imagine, if you will, that I have an axis here and a graph. Your typical client starts at the bottom and is trying to get to here. And as they're going down that continuum, they get a hiccup right about here. And they ask you to come in and help them. We come in and do your thing, and then you leave. And you're missing what I call the consultant's opportunity to help them get from where they are to where they need to be. Take advantage of that consultant opportunity. We come in, and yes, that would be transactional. By taking care of the consultant's opportunity, we become a permanent fixture of that organization where you're helping them grow. Make sense? I feel as though I'm preaching to the choir, but are we doing all right? Yeah. Cool. Then you have the second half. Implement a solution. Before I start telling them how wonderful I am, I want a menu of the top 3 things that they're looking for. And we find out what those top 3 things are by asking the right questions. I am amazed with small firms and large firms alike where there is not a commonality of the story they tell their clients. It's amazing to me how many people do not know the story of their firm as they're talking to clients. And it's like, what's up with that? There has to be a consistency of what we're telling. Granted, we've got different menu items, but we have to have a consistency. So we talk about that, and we spend some time on that. And then we move forward, and we negotiate a start. A closing is very easy. Based on the fact that we've unearthed what your key challenges are, and you've now looked at the solutions, and we've tied them down, what is it going to take for us to move forward? And I love asking that question because typically if I've gone this far, I want you as a client enough that whatever you say is a win for me. I mean, yeah, I have about 25 different closing techniques. We can talk about the alternative of choice or the triple choice. Yeah, we have clients, we have our large clients that pay some 6 or 7 figures. And we also have small clients that pay this. But our average client pays us about $15,000 to $25,000 to help grow their organization. But that investment is realized in less than 30 days. That triplicate of choice works. But before I go there, I need to know what their real pain is. Does that make sense? Yes. The question was, do I ever walk away from a prospect? When I had my accounting practice, I remember I actually had a client, and you ever have one of those clients that just made your entire office miserable? I remember telling them, there's 3,500 CPAs in San Antonio. There's only one that you can't do any work with anymore. But yeah, there are some clients, and it's kind of an integrity thing. I mean, there's some clients that's just like, we can't go down that road, and that's not going to work for us. You have to know where your threshold is. There's some things we do, some things we don't do. This is key. How many of you claim that you give added value to your customers? A lot of people have that, what I call noise level. If you're not doing one of these 3 things and you can't quantify it, you're not bringing value. To give value, you have to be able to enhance the client's revenue or reduce their costs or help them avoid some future catastrophe. Keep them out of trouble, whatever it is, help them avoid some future catastrophe. And I'll be honest with you, when I work with attorneys, I don't do, even though my best friend who I co-wrote the $1 Million Rainmaker with is a criminal defense attorney, we base the book on business-to-business transactions as opposed to the transactional transactions from a criminal defense attorney. He was John Patrick Dolan is the guy who I collaborated with the Rainmaker for attorneys, and he was doing a lot of business to business, and then he ended up getting 3 capital murder charges that has just swamped him for the last 2 years. So he's spending a lot more time doing the criminal defense thing. It has to be a business to business thing, and we both agree. if you're not enhancing somebody's revenue, reducing their costs, or avoiding some future catastrophe, and it's measurable, you're not actually adding value. I'm going to close this way. Living in Texas, I've developed this affinity, if you will, for country western music. I have any country western music lovers in here? Don't panic, I'm not going to sing. The magic about country western music is I think they all have hidden messages in the title of their song. How many of you have heard this song, they're putting in a nickel, but they want a dollar song? How many of you know people put in a little bit of work and want all the rewards? Put in a little bit of effort and want that home run. This is a process that works. You've put in the effort, it does come back to you tenfold. Another country western song. I know there's a hidden message on this. I've been working on it for a while trying to figure out what it is. It says, "Mama, quick, grab a hammer. There's a fly on Papa's head." Now, I know there's a message in there somewhere. There is a message in there. I know it. My favorite one is, "I'm so miserable without you, it's like you're still here." I love that one. One I like to close with to actually act as an action item for the rest of your year. There's a country western song that says, "Drink, swear, steal, and lie." And that's what I'm going to ask you to do over the next year. Drink from the fountain of friendship. These two guys are your friends. Drink from that fountain of friendship on an ongoing basis. They'll help you grow your business. 2, swear that you'll focus on the needs of the people you serve. Steal a moment every day to help somebody. And lie awake. I used to have a childhood hero, Red Skelton. How many of you remember Red Skelton? Used to love watching that show. Yeah, I'm 55. It was a while ago. But at the end of each show, he said, "Hey, thanks for spending some time with me, and God bless." Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for letting me spend some time with you. God bless each and every one of you. Thank you.